Welcome to episode 4 of the Kyero Pro Podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by Alfredo, as always, and a new face, Kevin Gibbons from Resignal, an SEO agency in London.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Just for continuity, Alfredo, in case somebody's hyperspaced here, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a marketing consultant. I work with real estate agencies and people in the real estate space, mostly here in the Costa del Sol in Spain. And I've been doing that since 2012.
Thank you very much. And Kevin, a quick summary of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, of course. And thanks for the invite on this. So Kevin Gibbons, I run an agency called Resignal. We specialize in SEO and work with a number of clients, kind of specialists in e-commerce, but have worked in a breadth of different clients and industries across the years as well. So dating back to 2006 is when I originally started an agency. So yeah, in March, it will be our 20th year, which feels crazy.
Wow. Well, thanks for joining us and welcome. I'm sure we'll get into the history of SEO.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for continuity, and in case you're wondering who the bald guy is, I'm Martin Dell, co-founder of Kyero.com, and we work with Alfredo, and we've worked with Kevin and Resignal in the past for SEO consultancy. And in today's episode, we're diving straight into SEO. It won't be a technical deep dive, but what we're hoping to touch on is what works now, what doesn't work anymore, what's changed and what hasn't changed in the world of SEO. And is it even relevant in this particular age of AI? Before we hit the cameras, Alfredo, you were telling us that in a previous incarnation, you worked for a marketing agency and you stopped offering SEO services. Can you tell us a bit more about that and just to frame the story of what we're talking about today?
Yeah, it was a marketing agency here in the Costa del Sol that specialized in real estate, so very much this topic. And we offered SEO services for the first 6 years I was there, maybe 5 years. And it was quite easy, there was a few tricks of the trade you did, and you could get websites to rank after 3, 4, 5, 6 months for most of the stuff that they wanted. There weren't that many ads, so people did well, it worked, everybody was happy, and you were the hero. Google started dishing out all these different algorithm updates, each one trying to stamp out people gaming the system, which progressively made things work that was working not work. And then people started using more mobile phones for searching and stuff like that. So that came into the mix. And then people on their mobiles don't generally wipe out their caches. So everybody was seeing different results. Cut a very long story short, it was the one service. We offered all the typical marketing services a real estate marketing agency offers, so blogging, social media, Google Ads, SEO, etc. We also built websites. And the SEO was the only service that we stopped offering and basically politely fired everybody that we were offering the service to, because I just couldn't live with it anymore. It was driving me insane. I still have PTSD so many years later. I just couldn't stomach getting another screenshot from an agent going, why are they here and why are we there and what is this and what is that? And the long explanations of why that might be the case, of trying to explain that we can try and make yours better, but we can't really see what the other people are up to, that maybe they haven't cleared their cache. So it was just the most painful thing, and it made us look like we didn't know what we were doing, which in retrospect probably true on this topic. So anyway, we just said, no, we're not offering this anymore, can't handle it anymore, and it's probably the best decision we ever made, because you're only as good as your weakest link, and that was definitely our weakest link back in 2018, I think it probably was.
Yeah, I mean, if we're digging up the past, I've definitely got some stories for around that time as well. But Kevin, I think you've clearly you've been in business during that period. What was your experience of 2018?
I found that really interesting because ours is completely the flip side. And this just proves that when you're talking about how to run a business, how to do marketing, it's like there's no right or wrong answer. You just have to pick what suits your skills best or what interests you best and what lights you up. And I actually love those days because we started an agency originally in 2006, so it's the early days of, honestly, some of the stuff back then I didn't particularly want to do for clients. So I don't know if you remember, like the article spinning stuff. We had a PC in our office that was literally like just there to run in the background and do article spinning and upload these articles with backlinks to all of our clients in terms of like article directories and web directories. And it was just, you're gaming the system. And there was something about me where it's like, this feels like there must be a better way than this in terms of how you get number one on Google. And I know, I mean, we certainly had a lot of those emails where it's like, why are they number one? And certainly had frustrations with sometimes the reason why they were number one is they're doing short-term tactics that I think will bite them. But today they are number one, and you can't deny that they're above you. And I remember at a time, kind of probably 2008 sort of time, I'm trying to think when Penguin was, somewhere between, must have been 2008.
14, I think.
Oh, was it really?
Around that sort of time.
Oh, yeah, no, Panda was first, wasn't it? Panda was that sort of time. Penguin kind of followed. But in, I think it's 2008, I went to SMX Advanced, a conference in Seattle. And back then, and I don't think this is the way now, but the US conferences were way ahead of UK. So I wrote our strategy of what we were doing for clients based on what I was hearing people talk about at these conferences. And in the early days of Panda, that was invaluable. And then I remember people referring to Penguin as Panda's evil twin. And it was that sort of thing where it's like Panda came along to penalize all of the kind of thin and weak content. And then once they had all of that information about what the thin and weak content was, obviously further down the line, those were the types of sites that they had links on them. They would then start to get penalized. And obviously there's more to it than that, but the two were certainly interlinked. And I think it was an interesting time because we launched content marketing off the back of it, which now people refer to quite commonly as digital PR. And I think we were the first SEO agency in the UK to really go down that route because it was, okay, well, let's do something that feels like real brand building and not kind of, like I say, maybe the spammier side of your article spinning and all of that side of things. And I'm sure we'll come on to it later on, but it feels like there's a bit of a curve with AI and LLMs. It's almost going back to those days and might have to go through a bit of that journey as well to get there. But yeah, like I say, there's certainly some interesting stories of what we did to get in and out of penalties, what we did to, get people kind of performing well. Kind of post Panda, Penguin. Happy to go into one of the property examples if you like, because I think that was kind of an interesting case study back then.
Yeah, please do. I think just sort of trying to tie it down and be specific about what worked, what didn't work, maybe what doesn't work anymore or what used to work. That would be really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting there's certain things where this was so long ago that I think I can probably mention kind of the brands involved, but the client we worked with 15 years ago was Nestoria, but it wasn't with Nestoria directly. It was, they decided or had noticed, back then people talk about the Google gap, and what they meant by that was Google says their algorithm's up here, it's actually about there. And there's this big gap in between where what they say the algorithm does and what it actually does, you can manipulate and take advantage of. And they over like Penguin and Panda was there to close that gap. But there was a midpoint where you could take advantage of that. So what we did is we set up a secondary brand called Gartu, which basically flooded the index of Google with 4-bedroom house in town, village, 3-bedroom house, flat, etc. Every town and village, every property type in the UK, and it must have been hundreds of thousands of index pages, tens of thousands every week that were getting pushed into the indexes. They're basically search result pages, but they have lots of content behind it because pre-Panda, you get rewarded for being an exact match on that URL for the query that people are typing in. So it's the best and worst case study I've ever been involved in because traffic went massively up. There's like a huge spike and it was sustained. I think we had a good 12-month run. We got lots of content indexed, we got it ranking, we got the traffic, and they can obviously monetize it off the back of that. Panda came along, and hit it so hard that the brand never came back, because all of that content basically should never have worked. And that's why the approach was to never do this on the main brand, because you don't want to sacrifice and risk what you've built all of that brand equity and everything else into by taking what might be a short-lived tactic. But equally, you could try something that might work for a certain period of time, make some money out of it, but accept that this is not going to last forever. So for us, I found that a fascinating project to be involved in, but it's also a learn where the boundaries are. The key word in all of this is risk. What's the risk that you're willing to take? And the answer to that was, on your main brand, none. On your secondary brand that you didn't have and you're creating for this purpose, yeah, we'll try a few things, and if it works, then great. So yeah, for me, like those test bed sort of environments, that was such a great way to learn and see what was coming.
That's really interesting. I mean, we could do an entire episode just about that case study, I think. Yeah. I guess for the typical agent that's listening to this, they probably don't have enough money to invest to recruit a Resignal sort of level agency, and they're getting SEO proposals from probably fixed price local agencies. How can they tell between some of these tactics that might work short term but are incredibly risky? Do you see what I mean? They don't know how to evaluate the stuff they're getting, and how do they know if it's risky or short term or long term and a big play? Is there a heuristic there that they could use?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that, you'll know how I work, where it's kind of more business focused, agency focused now, but there's a lot you can relate to business and SEO. And for me, it's almost applying business frameworks to that decision making. So I'd look at, obviously, the value that you think you're going to generate. So don't get too kind of distracted by, we're going to get you on page one for X, Y, Z. I think it's more about, okay, well, what value are you going to create? What's your business model? And how are you going to basically prove there's an ROI on your spend, whether that's SEO or other marketing activity, but what are you likely to see back over a certain period of time? And be realistic about that, and probably show forecasts, case studies of what you've done before, prove you've got a track record. I think that's really important. And understand the competitive market. So who's actually, like I say, kind of go back, who's winning, why are they winning, what are you going to do to catch them? Those three questions I always, if we're pitching to a client, more often than not now, I'm probably behind the scenes, but I always try and get those 3 points across. So that kind of, who's winning, understand who the market leaders are, assuming it's not you. And there's two different strategies, I would say, if you're winning versus if you're trying to catch someone. And then, yeah, kind of why are they winning? So unpick, okay, what is it that they've done really well? Because then you can sort of sense check what's being proposed to you from an SEO perspective of, why are you suggesting that? Well, if that's what the market leaders are doing, then that feels like quite a solid way to close that gap. And then that turns into obviously your strategy of what you're doing. So again, it aligns. Whereas if it's just, we're going to do something, but there's no real justification as to why, it, like I say, it's harder to believe in and buy into and kind of say, okay, well, we're going to take that leap of faith.
Interesting. I mean, if I put my agent hat on while I listened to what you were saying, my heart kind of sank a little bit, because I'm going, there's no quick win here. There's no magic bullet. There are no down and dirty tactics. Is that true, or am I just quitting too soon?
I would say I always class, if we've got a prospect that we're working with, my reaction sometimes is this is an SEO goldmine. And I say that when I see brands that have a fantastic brand reputation, or they're market leaders offline and they're not doing very well online. So for me, that's where there are quick wins, because you can say, okay, well, the market is saying that you're number one, your search demand for your brand is extremely strong and people know about you. Your SEO is just a bit shocking. So you probably haven't done, there's quite a lot that they actually don't see SEO as being a strong channel or something that they invest in. And if it's underinvested and they've done everything else really well, bringing that SEO up to speed, I think, can have really good short-term gains. But I think a lot of people are in a different boat where they might not be have the luxury of having an amazing brand or being market leaders, in which case I think, again, the challenge here, and I've spoken to quite a lot of people about this who have been in very kind of senior roles at large brands, but the reality is the best case studies are often the most boring on a short period of time. It's almost like the compound growth that you get of the month on month, quarter on quarter, year on year. When you start to keep that growing, that's where you look back and say, okay, wow, we've grown 400% over 5 years or whatever it might be. But it's quite rarely this big spike where it's like, oh yeah, you were doing this extremely badly, we've pressed this button and now your traffic's through the roof. I mean, it happens sometimes, but normally because something's gone badly wrong. Generally, it's the expectation should be slow and steady growth is a good thing to aim for. But equally then value in the SEO is a longer term play. And if you're looking for returns in Q1, then okay, there's probably different games to play in terms of paid search or whatever it is that's going to get you that more instant return.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really good framing of SEO today, is that it's a long-term strategic play.
Yeah.
Whereas you go back to when Kyero started 2003, I was in the same methodology as Alfredo's. Like, it was so easy to game.
Yeah, of course.
And as soon as Google emerged as the only game in town, you only had to game one system. Yeah. You know, but sort of pre-2003, you had we've spoken about it before, all the likes of Lycos and Alta Vista and MSN and Yahoo and all of those other weird things. But as soon as it emerged that it was only worth gaming Google, you could kind of just concentrate on that. And it was relatively easy.
Yeah.
And it's just not that game anymore, I don't think. Do you, as an agency sort of pitching for client work, do you still come up against other competitors who are willing to do the short-term gaming? Is that a fight you have to have these days?
It's tricky to always speak on behalf of other agencies, but just because we don't get to see what they're doing firsthand. So even if we've taken over work from another agency, you kind of see some of it. I actually think it's rarer. I think in the UK, the standard of agencies is actually very good. I think, again, sometimes you still get, why are they building those links and what's that actually do it? Like, there is stuff like that. But I do think the standards over certainly the last 5, if not 10 years, feels like it's actually quite strong. I think agencies are pretty competent in terms of services that they're offering. But for me, I always bring it back to the business results. So sometimes I think it can be quite easy to get lost in the best practice SEO sort of, how do you do everything that feels like this is what's being recommended and this is what you should be doing, to almost like scorecard yourself 100 out of 100, if you like, from an SEO perspective. And to me, it's a marketing channel that should be aligned to business objectives. And if you're not 100 out of 100, say you're 70, but your revenue's growing significantly, again, there should be a hierarchy of KPIs behind it, and it should be revenue based. So for me, I think this is why I know all of our clients that we work with will get other agencies pitching their services to them saying, did you know this, I don't know, hyperlink is broken or something? Because there's always problems. You can pick holes in absolutely anything from the outside. But it comes back to, okay, well, what's the business objective and are you achieving against it? And if we're like, let's say our growth target is 20% revenue year on year and we're hitting that, that feels like the most important thing to be getting right, as opposed to, like I say, this checkbox or tick box style exercise of, can you do everything perfectly? Because sure you can, but why? That again, it's not getting lost amongst that. And so I think there's a lot of agencies are very good at SEO. For us, it comes back to the business results and the impact that why are you actually doing it in the first place.
Yeah, interesting. And again, it comes back to that strategy sort of drive, doesn't it? What's our strategy?
Yeah. Yeah.
And certainly being on the receiving end of many SEO marketing proposals, they always find something that we've done wrong or could do better. And the question is, yeah, but is that relevant? Is that driving our strategy? Will it change our strategy? Going back to what you were just saying, sort of the old distinction between black hat and white hat SEO, is that largely a thing of the past now? Is it at all relevant?
But I think it's interesting in the sense of like what I was saying about the kind of property pre-Panda example and stuff like that. I've always found it quite interesting to be aware of where the boundaries are, because then you know sometimes how far to push them. I think all of our clients are relatively risk averse, so it's kind of, for us, it's probably more of an exercise of how do we stay away. And like I say, the only website I've ever got penalized in my career is my own website, and I did that as an experiment, and I literally knew exactly why it was getting penalized, and I could take it in and out at any given day. Literally one day to the next, I could bring it in and out of the penalty because I was testing the boundaries and knew kind of how it worked. And I feel like that actually was great experience to then take to clients to say, don't do that. But yeah, I mean, there's always black hat tactics that people will try. There's always people that will try and make some money out of it. I think there's a whole kind of world of people that will talk about these sort of things, and I'm sure they probably make decent money out of it, etc., etc. But again, it's like, that's not what we're here for as an agency. So I have some awareness of what these people are doing or how to test things, but equally it's like, it's more, like I say, to focus on the long game and tell that story to our clients about what we're doing and give them the confidence that this is sustainable into the future as well. I think the interesting thing is now, like I mentioned, like the LLM piece and what that looks like to potentially game the system, if you like, in terms of getting more visibility in LLMs. And some of that might be old school in terms of what we've done previously SEO wise. But equally, again, I think there's probably stuff that will catch up and change as well, because I mean, this technology is, if it's anything, it's very good at evolving, learning and improving over time. So yeah, I think an awareness of what people are doing and trying, and certainly if it's like you've got competitors playing that game, it's interesting to be aware of. But yeah, personally, unless that's a game you really want to play, you understand the risks and the lifespan of that, then I would probably stay away from it.
Thanks. Alfredo, have you got anything, any burning questions in your mind?
Yeah, I think I'd like to frame a few questions. Obviously, there's never a straight, easy answer to a lot of things, but so the scenarios that I think our audience would have. So we'd have, so like case A would be an established estate agency, been around for a while, has a good reputation, generates its leads through portals and Google Ads and other ways, but has their website is a mess in terms of SEO. Technically, they can find it if you look for it, but it doesn't really appear for anything. And they take a lead gen point of view on whether they should invest time and money on the SEO of their old knackered website or not. So the question, I think what I've understood from what you said is that if they have a fantastic business and a fantastic reputation offline, then am I right in saying that it's definitely worth investing something in that? Would that make sense?
I think it is. I think it's also worth thinking about who you're targeting. So I think a big mistake you could have is, if you're a good local agent, for example, within a specific market, is if you then say, okay, well, we're going to take on Rightmove. That just doesn't make sense. Whereas actually, if you say, okay, well, we're going to nail whatever city or region or kind of that you're targeting and build your brand around that, then again, that's something that you could quite easily say, well, we want to be number one or at least top 10 within that specific niche or location. That feels much more realistic. So there is a case of, when we do this, it might be like keyword research, for example. The volume is here. Like let's say the search volume for a very generic keyword like property is extremely high. You're probably not going to rank for that. And it's not very specific. It's probably not going to convert that well anyway. But if you were to look at, kind of the examples of that 4-bedroom house in town, village, whatever it is that you're kind of really specializing within, that's where you've got much more chance. Certainly if you've got unique content and stuff that you think is, again, it's more business language than SEO, but what's the differentiator? Why are you better than someone else, and how do you play to your strengths?
Right. Because let me paint you the picture of the scenario down here where I'm based. It's an international buyer market, so therefore the searches are from abroad for 4-bed property in Marbella, but the search takes place in Sweden or wherever, somewhere else in the UK. Then you have a situation where you have massive concentration of estate agencies. So probably 4,000 agencies, websites that are competing for some of the main terms around Marbella and surrounding areas. It's a high-ticket market, therefore you have a lot of portals as well, doing both SEO and SEM, as in Google Ads, for those positions. And then you have a huge influx of new agencies coming into the market that don't really know what's going on. So they're muddying the waters a little bit, both on Google Ads as well as trying to rank.
Yep.
And then you have two scenarios. This is where I'm coming from. You have two scenarios. You have the existing agency that's been around for 10, 15, 20 years, and they're nowhere to be seen on the Google results. They don't know what the likeliness is of them to do well there, given their site's a mess. And then you have the other scenario, which is probably the more common one, which is a new agency coming into the market. And typically these new agency websites, they are maybe 20, 30 static pages with a little bit of about the areas and about us and the usual stuff.
Yep.
And then between 100 and 10,000 property listings that typically come from an MLS and typically is shared with other agents. So there's no uniqueness to those listings whatsoever. And so the agent is a new agency. They want to know, okay, where am I going to put my money, for lack of a better word? And the conversation for them is, okay, so I'm a new agent in 2026. I'm not unique yet. I'm new. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say I'm unique, but I'm not. Should I even be looking at SEO in 2026? Or is it just such a big fight that I should just make sure all the technical stuff's done and then move on with my life? What's your thoughts on, it's a bit of a generalization, but it's a very real one. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, it is. And it's also, you don't want to break the bank, because it could be like, let's say it's whatever the marketing budget is, but as a slice of that pie, you probably at that stage don't want to say, okay, let's make 80% of this focused around SEO, unless there's a real case for you saying this is working extremely well. You might have a case where you say, let's make it 20%, and then if it works to a certain kind of degree of performance, you start to take that up bit by bit. It is tricky though, because it's also, if you start too low, you're probably not doing enough to actually make it work either. So it is a bit of a chicken or egg. The one thing I was thinking about is, you said Marbella and kind of like let's say people are searching from Sweden. I think sometimes there's a game in what is it people aren't doing. So I think in property, you might find a lot of people are optimizing for English language, Spanish, maybe German, but actually what are the other languages? So if you can go for the Nordics and stuff like that, I think certainly now you've got AI technology. And I think, again, long-term play, I'd probably recommend kind of having human written copywriting and all sorts of stuff like that. But if you wanted to do a low budget, how do we do something that's different to everyone else? There's a high value market here, and maybe let's test a few things out. Let's use AI. Let's spin up a website in Swedish and see how well that performs, because there's a gap. That high value market, but less competition. That might actually be an interesting way to go, because then you're not just going head to head with, say you've got someone else that they're spending, I'm just throwing out numbers, but 10 grand a month on SEO. You almost have to spend that just to stand still with them. And that's assuming you have the same starting point, let alone kind of, like I say, kind of a gap to catch. So that's quite hard. So yeah, sometimes it's kind of, how do you spot those opportunities where there might be value but less competition?
Pattern that I've seen over the years is agency decides what they think people are searching for, a real estate agency. So I'm looking, if people will be looking for penthouse in Marbella, for argument's sake, Then they hire a company to do the SEO for it. Then the company sends them these monthly reports that have the longest tails in the planet. So it's like 2-bedroom with blue walls in a Marbella. And they're, look, you're ranking well for all these different things. And there's this whole process that takes place, and agents have been through it 1,000 times. And eventually, if they get lucky, they realize that, here's 55 things that you're ranking well for that is relevant to your business. And then they find out that their website doesn't convert well from visit to lead. And so one of the things that I suppose what I'm asking is, what's the point?
Sometimes SEO isn't the best entry point. Sometimes it's actually paid search. Let's say paid search doesn't work for you and it's not profitable. That doesn't mean you shouldn't use it, because I think there's certain elements of how do you take a budget and spend that for, like, say, 3 months, test how well that works. Because what you don't know from keyword research tools is exactly what you said. How well does that convert? If a conversion rate, and like I say, on some terms, the conversion rate might be very low but high volume in terms of traffic, and sometimes it might be the opposite, where it's actually a low volume keyword, but it converts like crazy. So actually, those are the ones from an SEO perspective you want to double down on. And again, to the point of maybe doing the opposite to some competitors, if they're less competitive, that actually might be easier for you to rank for, and then that value's there. And it's not about how do you get a visibility graph that looks like it's amazing, because I've seen this before. There's interior design website, so someone that kind of is non-exec director with us, he runs up with his wife, and they got a lot of traffic for people that were searching for, it's like wallpaper designs 2025, that sort of thing, where it's like, well, sure, it gets you traffic, but the conversion rate is 0. So actually, why didn't you? And we flipped the whole strategy. We focused on undergarden basements because the volume was low, conversion rate was high, and if you've got enough money to do an undergarden basement, you're spending north of 100k on that, and that's where the real value is. So again, it's like understanding that business model, understanding the conversion rates, and then focusing around that. It's not almost like an ego game of how do we get number one for these top keywords. But I mean, that said, there's 2 sides to this that I have seen work well in property, and kind of correcting myself. It's not an ego game when you look at it from a business revenue perspective. There is a bit of an ego game in property sometimes when you can say, look at us, we're number 1 for Algarve property, and then you attract all of the agencies. So again, there's a bit of a chicken or egg there of sometimes you need that as a bit of a way to attract more people to you, because they see that, you've kind of got that pool of potential customers. But in general, if you're investing in SEO, you want to see that business return. So I would double down and focus on that side.
Yeah, that really makes sense. That really resonates with our journey at Kyero through SEO. That, back in the pre-Panda, pre-Penguin days, it was all about traffic volume.
Yeah.
And we focus much more now on lead conversion. So what do we do with the traffic? Do we generate leads? And it brings to mind I'll probably butcher this, but the difference between revenue and profit in a business. One's revenue is vanity and the other one is sanity, I think is the saying.
Yeah, that's right.
And you can't monetize what you can't convert, basically.
Yeah. And you can't reinvest the profit if there isn't any. You need to, it's pretty basic. It's actually, and this is what I mean about how you grow over time. Focus on that profit and then build it up. And then hopefully that can compound over time as well in terms of what you're doing. And equally, sometimes in SEO, you might have a longer term target. Your target longer term might be to be number 1 for Spanish property or whatever. I think there's no harm in having a big ambition, but you need a realistic time frame and a sense of what it's going to take to get there.
So Kevin, there's a few terms that this might make you cringe a little bit, but I'm just telling you what people hear. So there's a thing called SEO everywhere, this concept that, as I understand it, that you want to be found wherever they are, as opposed to necessarily running everything towards your website. So maybe found on YouTube, found on your website. What's that? Is that just a made up thing by people like me, or?
I think to a certain extent it doesn't make me cringe, But that's because I think people are searching differently. I think people are searching. We're just about to redo our website, so we talk about 4 different areas of search. And for us, it's you have your traditional search, so Google. You have AI search, so the LLMs, whether that's ChatGPT, Gemini, etc. Niche specific search, so in our case, quite often that's retail search. You'll get like Amazon, Google Shopping, but again, that could be specific to your own sector. And then the last one is social search. So YouTube in terms of videos, you've got TikTok, Reddit. I think all of that is important. But I think, again, where it can go wrong and overused is people just do a blanket searches everywhere. You need to be everywhere. And I don't think that's right. I think you need to understand where your customers are. And if your customers are using TikTok very significantly, then sure, you should be aware of that. And you should think about, okay, well, what's our strategy to maximize it? If they're not, I wouldn't worry about it. I think it comes back to, kind of, like I say, kind of who's trying to find you and how can you get in front of the right people. So for me, searches everywhere probably is the right term, but with that kind of strategy layer, if you like, of, okay, well, what does that look like for us, not the web?
That sort of brings us back to a conversation we had in an earlier podcast, Alfredo, about intent. What's the intent behind a visitor, whether they're on social or Google search? And from Kyero's point of view, we almost never convert, say, traffic from Meta. We get good engagement on Instagram, but we don't convert them to leads.
Yeah.
But our intent is more about filling the top of the funnel. So kind of traffic is good if we can convert it later. But from an agent's point of view, maybe getting that traffic is just too much of a long game. And what they want is somebody who's in the window to be buying in the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah. So if I was agent two exactly the same agencies, one did no social, no YouTube, no nothing. And the other one did loads and had huge follower counts everywhere. And all other things being equal, would in terms of attracting traffic to the website, would the one with all those social signals benefit more? Is that a thing still?
I think there's an element of reputation that, again, there's ways to fake it in terms of if you've got an Instagram account with hundreds of thousands of followers and very little real engagement behind bots, then I'm not sure it's going to work that well for you. But like, let's say you've got an audience that you do engage with, and they're real people, but they're perhaps low converting, then again, I think that can probably play into kind of some of those signals in terms of what that looks like. Like for a long time, if not probably since I started SEO, never really liked to look at kind of link authority in itself. I'd prefer to look at brand reputation, and link authority and the metrics that you get behind that, to me, feed into that. But I think there's all sorts of other things. So yeah, kind of how many people are searching for your brand being kind of quite a big one. And again, social signals, I think, like, to me, I think it would be very low weighted, but I think there's probably elements of truth that if you're doing all of these things and you've got a good footprint across different channels, I think that's certainly a positive. But I wouldn't do it for that reason alone. I think you need to be doing it for, kind of the right reasons within that platform. That said, I think there's probably a benefit to remarketing, because I think, again, people going back to brand perception, I think there is a brand perception of if you visited a website and then you see them as an ad on Instagram, Facebook, wherever it is afterwards, your perception is that that's actually a bigger brand than you might have perceived. And then you might want to revisit them again just because you've been made re-aware of them, if you like. So I think there's elements of that, but again, that's coming back to the marketing side of why you're doing it, and it's that kind of that focus, that niche of how do you build a reputation with a smaller audience as opposed to trying to be a global player, if you like.
There's something happening on LLMs like ChatGPT that reminds me to 2012.
Yeah,
which is I search for what's the best estate agent in Marbella, and half of the results are when you click through the link that it's bringing it from, is from their own website saying they're the #1 agency in Marbella.
Yeah.
And I thought, really, that's where it's getting this from?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As in, it's just like, and it's sort of. So I've been testing this for the last 2 years because I know the market. So I think I just wonder at what point when I make that search does it match reality-ish? You know what I mean? Because I know who all the main agencies are. So in real world tactics. But what I'm finding is that the source of the information for them being award winning, for being the top ones with the most listings and all, is from their own websites. How does that work?
Yeah, and that's what I was hinting about earlier on, where it's kind of, it feels like it's come a bit full circle in terms of how some of this is working. I think I tried to unpick this. I did a LinkedIn post last year about how the quality of results for SEO agencies is really poor. Not just in ChatGPT, but most LLMs. And if you are, I mean, I've done this for 20 years. I feel like I know who the good agencies are within our space, and there were ones there I'd never heard of, and for exactly the same reason, that it's basically manipulated by articles. And the post that I did is, I know how to game the system. We would write an article, and it's almost like reciprocal link building of, we write an article that says, these are the top 10 SEO agencies. Resignal are #1 in our unbiased opinion, and etc. And then here's some of our mates. And then someone else will do the same, and they'll be like, well, our agency is #1, but Resignal are our mates. And then you just end up on the getting pulled in because you've been referenced enough. And my point was, I don't want to do that because it feels inauthentic. And I think longer term, we are naturally, because people know us, we are appearing on some of those lists because they need to put agencies on there in order to rank for themselves. I would rather leave it that way, where if people want to list us kind of organically, if you like, in terms of being an agency that's recommended, that's fine. But we're not playing the game of how do we create an article that does this. And we are making a conscious decision by not doing that short term. Our rankings within LLM, if rankings is even the right term, it's probably not, but they're going to be sacrificed. But we're playing the longer game, that we think our reputation, our quality is stronger for actually being authentic. And like I say, like, again, it comes down to your risk, your sense of urgency of how quickly do you want to be ranking in here, and what game you want to play. So there's ways to game it.
My LLM of choice is Claude from Anthropic. I can't really put my finger on why I prefer it over OpenAI, but I do. And of course, we can see how the LLMs are disrupting Google search. And I don't think, if ChatGPT hadn't come along 3 years ago, I don't think you'd be seeing anything from Google. I don't think we'd have Google Gemini now if OpenAI hadn't come along. Anyway, I was talking to Claude saying, look, traditional organic search is being disrupted by AI. Kyero has a really strong niche in the foreign buyer market. How do we get known for being those people? And Claude advised me to do exactly what you've just described, is to start writing self-referential articles about how we're the foreign buyer expert.
That is the right answer. If you're asking a question of how do we achieve this, the right answer is you play that game. But I think there's also an element of trying to see into the future by learning from the past. I think LLMs are going to have their Panda or Penguin moment where it's like, wait a minute, this just doesn't feel right. And what's the better way to do this? And how do we score that brand reputation, if you like, on something that's a bit more meaningful as opposed to link swapping? So yeah, like I say, I would certainly prefer to play the longer term game and be patient about it. But I totally get why people are like, well, I want to be listed today because otherwise I'm leaving money on the table. So yeah, there's an argument for sure that maybe you could play both games. Like I say, again, it comes down to that brand. Do you want a web page on your site that recommends your competitors? For me, the answer was no. I feel like that's really weird.
There's another trend that I'm seeing that reminds me of the old days, and this is that currently, meaning the last 6 months, it's everybody's saying, no, you got to be asking questions because LLMs, it's all question and answer based. So everybody's websites are now getting changed to like, what's the best part of Marbella to play tennis? The best part of Marbella to play tennis is this, all over the websites. And it just reminds me to the conversations that we were having 10 years ago saying, you need to start doing the content in your website for humans and not for robots because no one's happy. The Google ain't allowing you to play it, and the humans don't want to read it. So it reminds me to that. The other thing that reminds me to those days, and this has been happening last week especially, and I was about to do a little rant on LinkedIn about this. The old thing I said earlier where I was getting screenshots of search results from agents saying, why are they here? What are they doing? Why are we not doing, etc. Even after we stopped offering the service, they would still do that, and they still do it to this day. What's happened last week, 3 times with 3 different agencies, is they're now sending me ChatGPT results screenshots saying, why are they in the top 5? Why are we in the not top 5 agencies in Torremolinos or whatever? Yeah. And I'm just getting PTSD all over again.
I feel like the annoying part of that is you also don't know how many people are searching for it. So what used to frustrate me back in the day was you'd get the CEO of a company asking why are we not number 1 for a keyword that only they search for. And you could back it up and say, well, actually, the search volume for this is so low that it's just not something that we focus on. This is where your customers are. Like, it's an annoying question to answer, but you can give a data-driven answer to it. With LLMs, it's not at that point yet that you really know, okay, well, this is how many people are doing this and what are you losing out by not being present versus what could you be gaining elsewhere, because the data and the kind of metrics that we've got to measure that right now are not up to the same standard. AI is very new, SEO is very established, so it feels like it's a harder one to almost justify one way or another. Whereas, like you say, the Torremolinos example, the answer probably very well is, well, you do know that only 3 people searched for that in the last 6 months. Would be quite nice to go back to them with, but you can't necessarily get that information.
The challenges for me with the LLMs at the moment is they don't have a business model. So it's quite hard to, the $20 a month that some of them charge, they're not making money at that level, and there's not enough people paying for it.
Yep.
And the big ones being venture funded, there's so much debt there. And at the moment, there's no clear route to them being profitable. And we had OpenAI last week announcing they were going to be serving ads on the free version of ChatGPT. I think the thing I struggle with is trying to get the LLMs and traditional search, trying to figure out what the big picture is. Whether the LLMs are going to completely disrupt search, traditional search, or whether there's some kind of cohesive way forward. Because at the moment we're seeing, just taking the Google example, we're really seeing Google disrupt their own money-making aside by putting AI search results above paid adverts and above organic search. And I just can't get my head around where the business model is, just say for Google in the future. Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I think there's a few points. I think for me, in terms of looking into the future, I would align myself with Google as much as possible for the reasons you mentioned. Google, I understand the business model. They can monetize search traffic. Whereas everyone else on the subscription model, that's not going to wash his face in terms of just paying for the extreme costs behind the scenes. So I think for me, it's understand where Google are going with this as much as possible. But I feel like there's an answer I've given whenever I've been asked about Google over the years, and it's always Google focus on 2 things. Number 1, market share. They need to be the best experience for searchers, because if they don't have market share, it's a bit like the point earlier of like you can have lots of traffic but no conversion rate, or the opposite, high conversion rate, in that case no traffic. They need to be market leaders. The second point is they've got shareholders that they've given healthy returns to over the years that will want to continue to receive their dividends in a similar fashion, and they need to be able to monetize and make this work for them. And I think Google at the moment, it still feels like, for me, 2025 is almost like a land grab year of who can win the race for AI and LLMs, and it's not finished by any stretch. But I think Google are prepared to say we're going to fund this race from a Gemini and AI mode perspective, and almost similar to how Google started originally, which is we want to build a search engine and then we'll figure out how to monetize it afterwards. I think they're taking a similar approach here, where they have some ideas about how you will bring in sponsored ads, shopping feeds, like all of that in terms of what that future looks like from a monetization perspective. And I think Google are the best place to, again, win that battle. But yeah, I think it's, at the moment, they're prepared to probably lose a bit of money, but win that long-term battle against your kind of OpenAI and everyone else, just to, kind of put their stake in the ground a little bit. But yeah, I think it's a good opportunity, certainly from what we're seeing from an agency perspective. I think if you go back 12, 18 months, everyone was talking about, well, there's no point in agencies anymore. It's game over. AI is just going to take everything. And I don't see that. I think actually, if anything, it's an opportunity. People are now talking about how do we maximize the chances of being featured on LLMs and what do we do? And equally, I think you need people in order to be kind of different in that strategy. Like what we're talking about, the approach of how do we think about what people aren't doing and how do you be accountable for those results? I think it's really hard to outsource 100% of all of that to AI. Certainly you can be more efficient, but yeah, I think because it's changing so quickly, it's just trying to use these platforms, see what they're testing, maybe VPN into the US because some of the changes come there sooner so that you can kind of get a bit of a head start. But yeah, if anyone's telling you what AI looks like in even 12 months, let alone 5 years or 10 years, at this stage, they're either lying or guessing. I think it's a case of like you've just got to ride that wave and see where we end up.
Yeah, I agree with your conclusion about Google. I think they're the only player playing this game and sacrificing profit. The rest are doing it with debt. And I know which one I'd rather be using.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And especially if that might work when people are willing to invest and give them money. But I'm sure there'll be a certain point where actually, I don't know, the economy doesn't do so well. People have put a lot of money into that and they don't want to do the next round, etc., etc. And they're going to have to find a way to monetize that. The pressure will be on them.
Yeah. I mean, I think I definitely agree with that perspective. And the other thing I'm really aware of is over the last 2 or 3 years, my search behavior has changed dramatically. Like Google isn't my go-to place anymore. I mean, I've kind of got a love-hate relationship with Google. I love them when SEO was easy, and now I think they suck. So I tend not to use Gemini for that reason. But it's not because there's a rational difference in the quality of their LLM. But I'm typically going to Claude first and looking for an answer or a brainstorming partner rather than looking for Google's traditional 10 blue links. Now, I know I'm probably an early adopter with this, and certainly for Kyero's traditional audience of middle-aged, older people looking to buy a second home in Spain, they're probably not using LLMs the same way I am, and they're probably not using, they probably haven't changed their search behavior as radically as I have. But do you see a trend in general about changing search behavior, sort of away from Google being the only game in town and now there are other channels?
Yeah, and I think I've gone through a similar journey to what you're doing, where Google is useful for a large number of searches, but that brainstorming partner is trying to understand that LLMs is not a replacement for search engines. It's an additional layer to me where you can figure things out that you probably wouldn't be able to do within even like 3 or 4, if not 10 searches previously. You can kind of do that in one, or one conversation, if you like. So yeah, I think there's a learning curve of how that's useful and what role it plays alongside traditional search. And sure, when we kind of look at stuff like zero-click search, some of it is because it goes to LLMs, or some of it is because an AI overview will give you the result without you needing to click. And I don't think to a certain extent, that's relatively new. I mean, like having what's the weather in your town and city as a featured snippet has been there for over 10 years. That sort of thing is, we were talking about zero-click search back then. It's just accelerated now in terms of what that looks like with AI. And yeah, I think the usage is now split. Some is all within Google, so it might be Gemini as a platform of choice, but other people, I use ChatGPT quite a lot, and we use Google Workspace. We've got access to Gemini and that side of things, but it's just probably a lot of people at this stage probably just picking a tool that they find they like the most or get the best responses from.
That's really interesting. So you're seeing the LLMs and traditional search not as black and white either or. You're seeing yes and, but we haven't really figured out the blend yet.
Yeah, I think that's right. Like the types of queries you can do, like we last year did an acquisition, and something I did towards the end just because I found it interesting rather than probably should have done it at the start if I'd thought about it, was we're doing an acquisition. This is the investment strategy. What would Warren Buffett think? And it's stuff like that where it's like, that was actually really valuable, because it's like, God knows how much he would charge if you were able to get access to him and his brain. But basically now you can't ask a search engine to apply that logic in the same way to your numbers and your scenarios and situations. So it's understanding the differences between, that's actually a really useful use case for LLMs and AI. Whereas search engines, again, it's always been talked about as kind of being kind of navigational, transactional, informational. But there's a whole new layer now, which I could say is kind of that kind of brainstorming side of things that feels like it's now got a big role to play.
Do you think that people are going to shift just naturally from writing a Google search that's supermarkets Marbella to what are the best supermarkets in Marbella with vegan food or something like that? Like the habit of giving more information through an LLM, which you have to do and you want to do. Do you think that will come across into Google? Do you think Google will stop seeing agent Marbella house Tormelinos and they'll start seeing longer queries?
I think that's an interesting point. I hadn't actually considered that, but I know, again, looking backwards, there's certainly a period of Google queries got shorter on the whole, because people just, like, again, back when you had like suggested searches and that sort of thing, that's coming back quite a while now, but LLMs is more conversational, and you do know that if you ask a more specific question, you're going to get a better answer, because it's that kind of input versus output style thing. So yeah, I think you're right. I think people will probably change, yes, almost the way they speak. I find that really, really fascinating, because it's like the way people learn English in European countries quite often kind of, over the years has been through like music and TV, isn't it? And now it's probably the internet and LLMs, and probably just a whole different way of, I don't know, hopefully everyone won't start just speaking in emojis. I don't know, but again, it's like, but that does impact how, like, just language generally. So yeah, it's actually a really interesting point.
Well, and the rise of voice search as well. I mean, I use an app called Whisper Flow. I've never, I'm this kind of a typer with two fingers, and that's just much quicker. But it does mean that when I'm talking to an LLM or Google, I'm going full sentences, sometimes whole paragraphs.
Yeah.
And I was listening to somebody the other day speak about LLMs going, look, they process language. You don't have to kind of go back 20 years and try and guess at a keyword search that Google used to like. You can just do stream of consciousness and all pick out the relevant bits. I think voice search is another interesting area.
Yeah, and also just, it's that, I think where Google wants to take this is it's that agent style, like your virtual assistant and your, I don't know, like all of that annoying life admin no one wants to do to book your haircut or change your dentist appointment, and like that sort of thing where you're getting through to that point. Or even there's a use case I did a couple of weeks ago where I got asked to do a PR interview, and I used AI to verbally give them my answers and then write it up in terms of something that probably would have taken me a lot longer if I'd have just written it from the start. And yeah, different things like that. I've heard examples of people who have turned case studies into a two-way conversational podcast, which again, that feels like, I mean, I am actually really here, but it does feel like you, I don't know, there's again, you blur the lines between what feels right and wrong sometimes in terms of how far you can take it. But the power that it has, and that's just today, let alone where it's going, is pretty incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
I suppose from a portal point of view, we have to identify what is the whole process of searching for a property, finding a property, and the whole, particularly with the foreign buyer market, international buyer market, is what are the bits that buyers want to keep as it is, and what are they quite happy to shed for technology to take over? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You want to sit there and go to ChatGPT, find me the best 3-bedroom apartments in Marbella, and then these two issues: one, do I want it? And two, does it actually deliver it? And that's perhaps where estate agents are probably wondering a little bit, like, what do I need to know about that? Are we there yet? Is it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I think it goes back to previous conversations in this series. We've spoken about what's the intent of the visitor or the buyer or the person generating a lead. And when they ask a question, either on a portal or on an agent's website that says, can you send me more photos or more details about this property? What they're not saying, but what they generally are really asking is, of the portal or the agent, can I trust you? Are you the right person to work with me on this journey that's really important, high value, high stakes? But of course, they never say that. And we know, speaking with agents and speaking with buyers, that when they make an inquiry for a property on a portal or an agent's site, they never buy that property. What they're buying is the relationship with the portal or the relationship with the agent. It's just that none of us are saying explicitly what it is we're trying to do. So I think it comes back to the point of a portal or an agent's website is to establish trust. And that's a really difficult thing to game and have a short-term perspective on.
I completely agree with that. And I think it comes back to, what is it that you do that's different and better than other people? That's the stuff that you shouldn't be sort of outsourcing or automating and generating. Whereas if it's just table stakes, then sure, if there's efficiencies there that gets you a level playing field. It's that whole like best practice makes you average. If everyone's doing it, it kind of just gets you to the same point as everyone else. But what is it that you can do that is actually kind of, like I say, significantly better or different than other people? And those are the areas I think to double down on. Like you say, sometimes that's relationships and trust rather than necessarily content and words, if that makes sense.
I would add to what you guys said, which is, from the buyer perspective, in my opinion, there's two types of trust that we're talking about here. There's a trust in, do I trust you to look after my best interests? But there's a more basic trust, which I think this is more related to the whole AI conversation, the portals, SEO, and everything like that. And that is, can I trust the information that I've just got, however I've got it? Can I trust the information that the person, you seem like a nice guy, this information in front of me, give me the top 3 penthouses for sale right now in Mallorca, Palma de Mallorca. Can I trust that these are the top 3 penthouses for sale right now in Mallorca? Because at the moment, when you do those searches, like I was saying earlier, on who are the best estate agents in Marbella, that's not accurate. It's not true. I can't trust that, so I don't go back to that. Do you see what I mean? So I think that's an important distinction with real estate.
But tactically, from a property perspective, I think that comes down to inventory, because if it's you've got the best inventory and these are the top 3 options, you probably will trust that. Whereas if it's like, we've got these 3, they're not very good, but they're the only 3 people that are listed properties on our website, then you're probably not going to trust that. So yeah, it comes down to, again, having that choice and then being able to provide the right answer.
So we're talking about the SEO of the website, but we're also talking about AI. Will the AI give me the top 3? Now, it can look everywhere. That's great. We know that. We hear that. But are these the best 3? What, I think until it starts providing the best 3 penthouses, I think there's a way to go. But I don't know what you think, Martin.
I forwarded you an article, Alfredo, from Seth Godin that basically said, when we start serving adverts on AI platforms, will that destroy the limited trust we have in those platforms? You know, if we're getting the one answer from say ChatGPT, and we don't know whether that's a paid advert or the real answer, where does the trust go? And I think that's still a huge gray area.
Yeah, and the reliability element that I'm talking about, you go back to the traditional model. You know, a website can have stuff on it that's not true, yes, and they can have all kinds of stuff. We know that. But there's a different thing that's happening right now, which is, tell me the top 3 penthouses in Marbella, Mr. LLM, ChatGPT, call it. Here they are, Alfredo. Did you just make that up? Yes, I did. That is super weird, I think, for anybody to go, oh, okay, hold on a minute. So these are not necessarily the top 10 estate agents in Marbella. Did you just make these you know what I mean? And this whole idea, I think for consumers, that is the barrier. That's like the first big barrier. Like, I'm not gonna buy a house in Spain on the off chance that ChatGPT's pulled the best ones are available, and that this is actually true and they even exist, and where it's got it from. Like, has it got it from a website from an agent that has 3 listings, and that in his information he wrote, these are the best 3 penthouses in Marbella? You know what I mean? Going back to what we were saying before. And I don't know. I think there's a real element there for at least for real estate and this side of things to do with trust, which is what Kevin's been talking about.
Yeah, I agree. In a couple of previous episodes, we spoke about the role of exhibitions in the real estate journey, the property journey. And if you think about credibility and trust, it's like, yeah, I rock up to Olympia or Earl's Court or whatever, and there are people there and they've got a stand and there's brochures and, you know, there's physical collateral that people understand. And, you know, going back to the early days of Kyero, we competed with print marketing, agents printing up flyers and sticking them under windscreens. And you could make all the arguments you like about, well, that's not where your buyers are, but they understood it. They understood the medium and the mechanics of the marketing. And I think we're just in that weird no man's land of, we don't know what we can trust right now. I feel like I've led us down an AI garden path. I'm sorry about that. Trying to wrap this up. Let me put you on the spot, Alfredo, and go, if an agent's talking to you about SEO, what would your one piece of advice be for them now? You know, a smaller agency with not an unlimited marketing budget.
Get advice from a SEO expert that is currently successful in what you're trying to be successful, and get references.
Thank you. Kevin, can I ask you the same question?
Yeah, I'd certainly back up what Alfredo's just said. I also think one of the points we touched on earlier is that SEO might not be the entry point. So I'd maybe challenge them a little bit to say, can you do experiments with paid search? Can you understand the market and what you're going for as a research project? And maybe the agency helps you with that project before you then kind of certainly put both feet in terms of an SEO budget, because that question of how much should I invest in SEO has to come down to a business case, and there has to be a strong believability in what you're saying you can achieve over that time frame. So I think you have to really kind of stress test that business case as much as possible, and paid search can help you to get to that point.
Nice. Thank you.
What about you, Martin?
Yeah, I think I've got sort of another flavor of what you both just said. And I think I would say, be clear about what your website is for, what job you want it to do. Is it there for backup credibility, or is it there as a lead source? You know, are you expecting to drive traffic to your website to back up your other marketing? Or are you expecting leads to come from your website? And they're different jobs and a different investment and different strategy.
So Martin's got the giggles, so he can't close this episode up. So next week we're talking to an agent that has built his whole business around using leads from Google Ads. So we're going to go into Google Ads primarily. What is the good, the bad, and the ugly? Who is it for? Who is not for? What you should know, and hopefully help you make some good decisions on that front.
Fantastic. That's what I was going to say if I could have spat my words out. Thanks, Kevin. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
It's a great conversation.